Hey kids, and welcome to the Stylish Rumble Harmony tutorial rigging guide tutorial. My old microphone was getting a little bit garbled, so I got myself a grown-up microphone. I did a few tests and it seemed to be working okay, but I don't know what I'm doing. It's my first day, alright? So today I'm going to look a little bit at the head. So it's going to be a quick intro of how you'd start the head and doing the 3D head rotation that everybody's keen on nowadays. So first thing I've done is imported my template, set up all the pivot points except for one of the eyes. So I'm going to do that with you. So because we've got a bunch of different pieces here on this eye, the main part of the eye and the eye itself has two separate pegs, okay? So this eye is going to just contain the eye white and eyelashes, that kind of junk. And then this is the eye bits, so all these little pieces, and the eyeshadow, because this has got a little bit of eyeshadow going on. And then all of that has a master peg. I'm going to paste that all so you can see, so it's pretty clear. But quickly, I'm just going to set up the pivot points. I can select multiple pieces that are going to share a pivot point. So here, the eye bits is going to be the iris, pupil, and highlights. So I'm going to grab that piece, and then the three of them individually have their own pegs as well. And I'm going to move my pivot point for those all at one time. So now that they're identical without having to go in and copy and paste them down here using this. Of course, if you already have one set up, you can copy and paste your pivot information down here. This is the pivot offset, which is how we're setting up these peg pivots using our rotate tool, moving our guy around and setting it up. So I've done that already with the whole head because it's really boring. I'm not going to make you watch that. Try to be nice, you guys. Next thing we need to do is get all this artwork onto the template. Okay, so we have our artwork from our designer. What we're going to do is copy that, and down here we're going to save it into a useful place. Some working template folder that you have set up already, or in a local folder. Just protect it, put it down here. Then we can copy, we can create a brand new one. We're going to create new drawing files because we don't want to use our old drawing files. We're going to create new columns, remember? So this is a duplicate, not a clone. It has nothing to do with this one. Then we're going to deactivate and unplug our art. We're going to group the art. We're going to call it design art. Oh, and before we even do that, we should lock it. Just don't touch this. Turn it off. Design. We're gonna hide it. We're gonna put it all the way down here. Okay? Don't break the designer art for the love of all that is holy. So now we have our rigging art, and our art is safe from our stupidity because everybody does it. I'm gonna call this rig art. So now that we know this is only for our rigging, we can destroy this, we can cut it up in pieces, and nobody's gonna get mad at us. I'm gonna run the whole production. And now this is one thing I see people do. Copy the nose, and they'll paste the nose. And then they'll copy the mouth, and they'll paste the mouth. And I'm gonna take a quick look down here. My mouth, I have a line layer selector hooked up already, and then next to it I have a color layer selector hooked up to the jaw because we're going to put the mouth and the jaw on the same layer. And I'm going to do a mouth episode special to that, but I'm just pointing that out since it's already in here. But when you copy your art, what I want you to do is copy a bunch of stuff and then paste all of it. So I'm just going to turn my current drawing on top because right now it's not popping things to the front and it's getting hidden behind. So now I know that the only thing I want in there is the eye white. So I'm going to cut everything else, paste it into the next layer. You can see this eye wasn't set up very good, so I'm going to have to do that. Then you would cut all the pieces you want and put it on the next layer. And then cut the pieces you don't want in there and put it on the next layer. And this may seem kind of trivial, but it actually saves you a lot of time to cut paste like that instead of copying and pasting each individual piece like one at a time. And even worse is like using the timeline for this. That's just, don't even use the, don't do that. Don't use the timeline. Just cut, paste, cut, paste, cut, paste. Okay, so now I've got my eyes and stuff. Got all my eyes pasted in there. Now currently the eye whites are covering the pupil. I've already got this set up so that my color art is cutting the eye bits, similar to what I did in the eye episode, and then the line art is going over the top. So I can cut and paste my eye white, and it's already set up with the template because I don't do anything twice. I'm just too lazy for that. Templates are there to save you the trouble of having to do any of this stuff ever again. Now this one has a double highlight, so you may want to put that on two different layers. It's not something I'm going to worry about too much right now. We've already set up our pivot points, so everything should now do what you think it will do. I've also currently got a features peg. So this is just connected to all those different pieces. So I can grab them all and move them all over the face. And this is already going to give us a little bit of an uppy, downy, lefty, righty situation. We haven't set up her head yet. Okay, so I'm going to cut the head and paste it on here. And then I'm going to cut the jaw off. I'm going to paste it on the color art of our mouth. And the idea behind this is our mouth can move here on our line layer, and our jaw can move independently. And it's also going to be movable if we're going to be doing our rotation. We're going to want it to be able to manipulate that a little bit. And the top of the head has its own peg because it needs a space to live. And then cut our ears, left ear, right ear. So once our design art is completely empty, we know that we've used all the pieces that the designer's given us, and we're ready to double check our situation and see that everything is working. Currently, one of our ears is on top, so I'm going to move that to the back because this is a front rig and this is set up to be a 3/4 rig, but we're going to use it for all of them. So every time you get to the end of a stage, so pasting in my pieces and setting up my pivot points, that would be the end of like stage 1 in my brain. And so I just make sure that everything is working. Got all the pieces that I need and all my pivot points are set up. Next thing we're going to do is turn to our 3/4 view. So this can, like all forms of rigging, have varying level of complexity. You can use deformers to make sure that this is ultra uber smooth, setting up envelope deformers all the way around this face. But for now, I'm just going to see how few deformers I can get away with. I'm going to extend the exposure backwards because I've put my front head on frame 3. You can put it on whatever frame you want. I just like to do from side to side, from frame 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but that's kind of an arbitrary thing. The next thing we need to do is animate our head as close to the 3/4 as possible. Whenever you're animating, you start at the top peg. The very highest peg we have is the head peg itself, and I'm going to move that over a little bit because we want our head to move as we rotate. The features peg, I'm going to deactivate the head and the jaw so I can see the features on top of my art. And now I'm going to move the next peg down over so that things are as close as possible. And when I'm doing this, there's different ways to do it. You can kind of line up eyes or whatever, but in my brain, the easiest way to think about it is to find the center line of this head here and then put the pivot point where you want the center of the pivot to be. It's less crucial for the face, but for the eyes, you want them to move exactly where you want. So the next level of pegs I have are the eyes and eyebrows. So I'm going to select the left ones together and I'm going to line them up as best I can. Again, when I'm thinking about this, I'm like, where do I want this pivot point to be? That's where I'm going to put my eye. And then the eyebrow, I'm going to need to move it in a little bit more because this pivot point needs to be here. Okay, so then we can stretch our art into place, right? It's not quite lining up, but we get it as close as possible. And this one's lining up pretty good. So this part, it's a little bit tedious because you have to do this with every single piece of the head. Boop. There. And then we have to bring back our head and our jaw. Right, so the head is a little bit tricky because it's going to need to change shape. The skull itself is going to be covered by hair, so that's a little bit less crucial. In this case, I'd focus a little more on the forehead and getting that as close to right as possible. So in this case, the jaw and the head are not lining up very good. You can see she's looking pretty jacked up. We'll get our ears. All right, so this ear needs to come forward. So we're going to go to our coordinates control points, put in 0.0001 F, so it comes forward, and keep that increment as tiny as possible, as I've scolded you in the past. So we're going to squish this eye and see if we can get it pretty close. So now we can use our main composite of the head. So all of our head stuff is going into this guy, and we can deactivate and activate that to see if we're getting into the ballpark of where we need to be. That looks pretty good to me. The eyeballs themselves, looks like they're skewed a little bit in here, but I don't think that's a huge deal. That's something the animators can worry about. The next thing I would do is pick out all the pieces that do not fit. This eyebrow cannot be forced into this position. No, it's not going to happen. So in this case, I would put a drawing substitution. So drawing 1 is here, doop. Drawing substitution 2 for this eyebrow. Then I take the eyebrow off of our art and paste it onto this eyebrow. So because we've pre-animated this into place, our pivot point's already set up for this new drawing. And here I haven't set a keyframe on my first view because there's no animation on our front view. We can just select the entire group minus the art in case that's been moved, and Shift R and revert that back to its position. So obviously it's not quite getting there yet. But once you paste in all of your pieces that don't quite fit, it's going to start to look a little bit more like it should. So I put in all the pieces except for the jaw and the head. And here you might need to tweak the substitution timing or something. Like here I'd want it to change a little bit sooner to this new nose. That looks a little better. So as you're testing it, you might need to muck around with that a little bit, but you do the best you can with the art you get. And already this is starting to look a little bit more three-dimensional in its rotation. The next thing to get is this jaw. So as I said, there are different ways to do it. One way is to break this jaw up into two pieces so you can manipulate the left side and the right side independently. Because as it turns this way, this side's getting longer and this side's getting shorter. So that's something you can't do with one piece. You can put one on the color layer and one on the underlay. So if that was the case, I'd just add a new copy. So copy paste, hook it up like this, and change this color to an underlay. Cut the color in half and put it on the underlay. Boop. They could have a shared pivot above, like that, named, and then set up the pivot point. So that if they still wanted to do something with them together, that's possible. And if you do this, you might need to extend your actual flesh tone over a little bit, just so that you don't get a seam when you're rendering. But now when I rotate it, I have more flexibility with each one. When I copied and pasted the peg, what I should have done is actually created a new peg, because I've created a peg clone as well. So give him his own peg. Now it will work. Now I'm going to reset this. I'm going to use this shared jaw peg of the two halves of the jaw to get it as close as possible, because again, you still want to start with the highest possible one and then work your way down. In some situations, you can get a pretty exact match just by skewing it. Yeah, this head I can get pretty close. And then if you want this last little piece to get the jaw exactly like the designer art, you could add a drawing substitution there. Of course, I didn't set keyframes because I'm a genius. Reset, back to 0. And this is another reason why I like having as little animation as possible, because if I need to revert these back to the original position, it's actually a useful position. That's getting pretty good head rotation without a deformer. So I just wanted to show you that way, because standard practice is for animators to put as many deformers as possible. So instead of doing this, they'll actually put a deformer in there so that they can get exactly the right position without having a drawing substitution. But not everybody's computers can handle that. So sometimes you like to save your stuff for later. And if you look at your jaw, like, it looks pretty jacked up here, but it's fine, because when you're animating this, it's going to work exactly like the animators expect it to. This part of rigging can be really tedious, cleaning up these seams, but it really is the bulk of it. We're just going to play around with the head to get it to do what we need it to do. And this pop here is because the design isn't like super stellar. Sorry you guys, I did the best I could in the time allotted. But that's something that could be worked with the designer, who in this case is me, so I can yell at myself later. This ear, that's going to be one of those animation calls, like when it actually pops in front, and it might need a few in-betweens if they want to get it to be super seamless. You can get a pretty solid head rotation without actually needing any deformers in there. When you go from this to the side, that's when things get a little bit more tricky. Okay, so let's start that one. Let's keep going. We'll go over this way. What I'm going to do is copy this frame and paste it. And I'm going to keyframe this time because I really want my keyframes to hold up. The 3/4 to side is always a bit of an awkward transition. This ear we can slide back there, no problem. It's really hard to get something like this super seamless, but we can get a pretty decent result. So we start at the top peg, that, and then the features peg. So this is one of those judgment call things. I'm going to deactivate these things. I'm going to grab my features peg, and I'm going to move the features so that the pivot point is right on the bridge of the nose, so still the center of the face. You don't need to move it that far. Like, it's one of those you'll see if it works out dealies, and then you go down to your next one, which is going to be eyes. This side, you can see why this is where it starts to get a little bit wonky, because the eye, it's actually back here and in the back. So we can 0.0001B to move it back. Grab this in the eyebrow. Put this pivot point where I want it to be on the eye. So about there. So now this eyebrow is not quite working with this drawing. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to add a drawing substitution, and I'm going to grab that eyebrow. And of course, if this is your own design and you feel like you want to keep this new eyebrow just for consistency or whatever, that's certainly something you can do. But if you're using production art, use the art that they're giving you, unless you're super certain that it's jacked up. Like, if you feel strongly enough that you want to change some designer art, talk to the designers first, unless it's something very minor. Like, if it's the difference between the rig working at all or not working, then you could probably make a reasonable call, as long as you're not changing the design too much. But if you're ever doing something where you're changing the look of a character because you don't feel like it looks right, that's not your decision. Somebody with more power than you has chosen that design, and you go with it, or you talk to them. You don't just unilaterally make design decisions. Here, the eye is not going to line up because this part is looking quite different. So I'm going to grab my eye substitution, including the eye white. So if I'm making kind of a tricky selection, because this has lots of bits, I will cut and then undo to make sure that I'm actually selecting on the proper thing, and replace this eye, cut the eye white, and then replace the eye white on the color layer because we've set that up over here. Yay! And the nose. Now, side noses are very tricky because side views often look bad. It's just, when you really stylize a character for a 3/4 front pose, often it just doesn't work out in side view. So I did the best I could, you guys. We're going to have to reactivate our head. Let's see if we can do this without putting in any deformers or anything. And of course here, the back of the head is not a huge deal because it's going to be covered in hair. But the forehead has to be perfect, you guys. Because if the forehead looks jacked up, your side view is going to look terrible. This part is just so important. You gotta get it. You gotta get it right. I'm gonna talk more about the mouths, like I said, in another episode, because getting this mouth to open and getting the art to work is gonna be, it's a little bit tricky, so I think that's worthy of an episode. Bloop. And then we're gonna get these jaws in there. So here is where things get bad. I find the easiest way, if I'm using this double jaw technique, if you're using a deformer, you're gonna have a much simpler time getting this jaw to work. That's why I chose to do it the hard way, because you can figure out the easy way by yourself. I trust you guys. I feel like you're well on your way to being experts by now. And then this one is going to need some serious work. So I can actually skew this right down, because that's how, when you animate from the 3/4 to the side, this side is just going to disappear. So I can skew this down pretty significantly. You want to think of this as that back cheek. And then we have a decision where we're going to put this chin. I'm going to put it on this front one. So even though this is very skewed, you can see the original drawing is this big, is this half. But in the camera view, we've smushed it right down in the mouth because they share a drawing. You can see all the other pieces are there too. They're just super smushed. But if I cut this, and I want to be very sure that this one is the color art, so I'm using the left half of the jaw, screen left, grab the front of her face off the line art, and I'm just going to use a cutter and just hack a big old chunk of face off right now, and then make sure I'm on the right layer on the color art, and then paste in the face. Now this line here has been thinned out through stretching, so what we can do is just fix that manually, because even though when you're drawing on this, you're getting a lot of distortion on your brushes, the idea behind a rig that's done this complexly is that the animators will not be doing drawing substitutions. So it's worth it to go in this far and really like jack up the face, because then the animators never need to touch it again. So I feel like this head is going to need to be hacked off in the back. This is something that once you have the hair in place, you can make a little bit of a more informed decision on whether you need the back of the head at all. If she has hair like this whole part of her head is unnecessary. We can just hack the back of her head off so it's not causing any problems back here. Okay, so now I'm gonna turn off our art. We've got this beautiful thing here, and then we use the pieces to fill in whichever gaps we have. And here our eyeshadow. I haven't really been giving that the attention that it deserves. You probably need drawing substitution just because it's like sticking out here. Pay attention to all those little details while you're going. Now, the next thing we can do is see how well this actually in-betweens. So I'm going to extend the exposure between these two. And it's not bad. I've seen worse. In the case of this going from a side to 3/4, you may need to give them in-betweens. It could be up to the animators themselves to in-between it, or they may want you to give them more than just the basic views. Alright, so in this case we're going to have to bring these forward a little bit faster. Okay, here's a good thing to notice. Our nose is going to put that in front of our eye. Okay, so I've given it a little bit of a cheap in between there. That you can get like 100% out of this chin if you decide you want to put an envelope deformer in there. But on a 2D show, if you are expected to do this level of rotation, you got bigger problems than that chin, bro. So obviously you just do the exact same thing for the other side of this rotation. Just move your stuff along and then change substitutions where you need it. Sometimes you can get away with just one drawing for the eye, sometimes you need 2 or 3. And because we've got this broken up so much, I just want to show you that you've already got free rotation going up and down. Alright, so you're starting to get a little bit of a cheap head rotation just by shifting this stuff around. And then you can get left and... well, I don't have right because I haven't done the right yet, but you can just carry on and finish your whole head. And now you're starting to get a little bit of rotation. And of course you could combine these views. And so I just wanted to show you that with all these pieces, once you have them all set up, you can get some decent head rotation just by shimmying them around a little bit with perspective. So as all 2D animators should do, they should study how drawing works and get your perspective down. So even if you're not the best draftsman in the world, you should understand if you want to rotate the head that way, then you need to have your stuff sort of headed in that direction. Okay, so once you know a little bit about that kind of garbage, you can start getting more out of your character's features. Okay, so I'm done. I'm gonna just go now. Hopefully that helped. If anything's unclear, please leave a comment or question down below, and I will get back to you. For realsies. If you know anybody who could stand to learn a little bit more about Harmony, please share it with them. Like, subscribe, all those things internet people ask you to do, and I will see you in the next video, which I think will have butts. Yeah, butts.